My English teachers told me not to use the dictionary, but actually I ignored that piece of advice, and that's probably why my English got better while my classmates didn't. I started with English at kindergarten. There were games, repetition, the teacher pointing at fruits and vegetables. Honestly, I hated it because it made no sense. I mean, we are in northern Italy in 1997 or 1996, something like that, 1998. Nobody around me speaks English, of course, and I have no plans to go, like, to London and go buy vegetables. Definitely my parents were not also the kind of people that go abroad and want to buy stuff on the spot. I was really like, I don't need that. My teacher's pronunciation also was honestly cringe. I couldn't read yet, of course, so I couldn't even anchor the words to anything. And that was a pain because I've always had a very bad auditive memory. I was 5 years old and was already thinking, this makes no sense. But anyway, primary school was not much better, honestly, because the book was extremely chaotic. I remember that I had no clue about what words I was supposed to know. It was really just a complete mess in my mind. But I found something that helped, the dictionary. Because I would look up for words, compare the Italian and English, and suddenly things started to click a little bit more, because at least I knew, okay, this word means that. Because of course the book was completely in English, and I had no clue about what I was actually having in front of me. I could see how sentences were built in both languages, for example, at once, for once, finally, and that's why, at least, I started having decent results in written text. My teacher, of course, repeatedly said not to use it. I said, I don't care. Then, in 2005, at the end of the 6th grade, a girl arrived in my class from the Philippines with an outstanding American English, of course. The rest of the class basically treated her like a toy, because of course we were like 11. Something to show off, like you have a trophy if you're able to deal with her somehow. I honestly had a different reaction because I just thought, okay, this person needs to learn Italian as soon as possible. So how can we try? There's always this thing of the time obsession in my mind. How can I help her reach this objective ASAP? And one day we were in the IT lab, which is a fancy word to say just a classroom with some computers. We were uselessly copying a text in Italian on the computer, exactly. And the teachers were sending her from desk to desk just to let her make a little bit of acquaintance with each one of us. And I thought, okay, this girl needs to learn something here. So I asked her to read the text in Italian. Of course she couldn't understand, but at least she trained her mouth, because at least she could see, okay, if you read something in this way instead of another one, I cannot get it. And of course it will be too difficult if I have to dictate it to her, because she doesn't recognize the sound, and maybe also I didn't know whether the keyboard was the same. I don't know. So I said, you know what? At least try to read out loud, because at least you're active, while all the others were like, oh, I have a new toy next to me, I will do everything and try to interact a little bit, but of course it was extremely boring. Just thinking about the most practical thing I could offer her. And she ended up actually spending more time with me than with the others, and of course it was not very good for my, let's say, how much the other classmates loved me. And because she kept coming to me when she couldn't make herself understood, I also had a reason to keep improving my English, because of course her level was much better than mine. For example, we also texted each other frequently with our Nokia 3410s, of course with the amount of SMS that you can exchange 21 years ago. But anyway, still, I could put a little bit of English several times a week, also outside the school time in my life. Then, at the same time, I also discovered the language exchange platforms like ShareTalk and music. That was the moment where you start discovering what kind of music you actually like, and that's why you outgrow the childhood music, And in my case, the groups I picked were Jamiroquai, Depeche Mode and Placebo. And I would sit with my CD-ROM player, actually, and the lyric booklet every afternoon, reading along, just listening to every song in loop and singing also out loud and looking for the translations on the internet. Why? Because my method was always the same thing. Find a way to get a correspondence between English and Italian. What means what? I could build a mental structure, and then, of course, I could use the language for something that actually mattered to me, because I was actually interested in knowing what the heck I was hearing from the songs. Nobody taught me to do that. I just did it because it worked. And by the end of middle school, what we call middle school in Italian, so it's like the 6th, 7th and 8th grade, my English was basically already much stronger than my classmates, and I would say that it's still roughly 80% of what I can say right now. Because after that, basically I stopped progressing. High school didn't really give me that much. I had 2 years of grammar revision I honestly didn't need. The rest of the class, of course, maybe needed, but it didn't really improve their active proficiency. Then we had 3 years of literature I really didn't care about, except Beowulf, which was honestly fascinating for me because I really liked seeing, the language side of English, so how it evolved throughout the centuries. But nobody else was as interested as me, so of course we spent like a very little time on it. Unfortunately, and outside the classroom, I kept going. I was using YouTube, Facebook, Language Exchange. The gap between me and my classmates kept growing, of course, and the school had nothing to do with that. What actually worked, as usual, was clarity and intrinsic motivation. Clear building blocks, so seeing how the language fits together, not just memorizing isolated words, and a real reason to use it every day, not a fake one invented by a curriculum. For me, it was my classmate, because what I wanted to do was to help her. I wanted to keep up with her level as well at the beginning when she still couldn't speak Italian, and I wanted to be useful for her. You don't need the same story, of course, but you do need the same ingredients. Structure that you can actually see, and something that makes you want to open the language every single day. If you're studying but not really using the language, that's the gap, and that's where progress stops. The frequency circle is exactly where I work on that. You write in your target language 2 to 3 times a week. I respond to everything. We meet live. There's a free trial, but you should give it at least a month to see the results. If you post twice a week for 4 weeks and join at least one meeting but are still not happy, you'll get your money back. Start with journaling if you're not ready for that yet. And don't forget to subscribe to my newsletter, Diary of a Language Freak, on Substack.